In the grand halls of Valdoria Palace, where golden chandeliers cast dancing shadows on marble floors, secrets lurk behind every velvet curtain. What happens when a royal guard discovers that the princess he's sworn to protect is not who everyone believes her to be? When bloodlines are questioned and thrones hang in the balance, loyalty becomes the most dangerous weapon of all. Princess Charlotte Valdoria has lived her entire life knowing she would inherit the crown. But on the eve of her coronation, a mysterious letter arrives that threatens to destroy everything she's ever known about herself. As palace guards rush through ancient corridors and whispered conversations echo in hidden chambers, the very foundation of the kingdom begins to crumble. This is not just a story about royal politics. It's about identity, betrayal, and the price of truth in a world where power means everything and trust means nothing. When the past refuses to stay buried, even the most loyal servants of the crown must choose between duty and conscience. Prepare yourself for a journey through treacherous palace intrigue, where every smile hides a dagger and every alliance could be your last. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of Valdoria Palace, casting colorful patterns across the polished marble floors. Captain Marcus Blackwood stood at attention outside Princess Charlotte's chambers, his hand resting on the pommel of his ceremonial sword. 20 years of service had taught him to read the subtle signs of palace life. The hushed conversations between servants, the way courtiers' eyes darted when they thought no one was watching, and the tension that seemed to cling to the air like morning mist. Today felt different. Today felt dangerous. Princess Charlotte Valdoria was set to be crowned queen in 3 days' time, following her father's peaceful abdication. At 25, she possessed the grace and intelligence that had made her beloved by the people of Valdoria. Her golden hair caught the light like spun silk, and her emerald eyes held a warmth that could put even the most nervous courtier at ease. Marcus had watched her grow from a spirited child into a woman worthy of the crown, and his loyalty to her was absolute. The heavy oak door to the princess's chambers creaked open, and Lady Eleanor Whitmore emerged, her face pale and drawn. As Charlotte's oldest friend and confidant, Eleanor rarely showed such distress. She glanced at Marcus with worried eyes before hurrying down the corridor, her silk slippers making barely a whisper against the stone. Marcus frowned. Something was wrong. He knocked gently on the door. "Your Highness? Is everything well?" Charlotte's voice came from within, steady but strained. "Please come in, Marcus." He entered to find the princess standing by her window, still in her nightgown, staring out at the gardens below. Her usually perfect posture seemed somehow fragile, and her hands trembled slightly as they gripped the windowsill. "Your Highness?" Marcus stepped closer, his protective instincts alert. Charlotte turned, and Marcus saw something in her expression that chilled him. Fear. Not the kind of nervous excitement one might expect before a coronation, but genuine bone-deep terror. "Marcus," she said quietly, "how long have you served my family?" 20 years, Your Highness. "Since you were 5 years old?" She nodded slowly. "And in all that time, have you ever had reason to doubt my parentage?" The question struck Marcus like a physical blow. In the rigid hierarchy of royal protocol, such questions were not just inappropriate, they were treasonous. Yet something in Charlotte's voice told him this was not idle curiosity. "Your Highness, I don't understand. Answer me, please." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Have you ever wondered why I look nothing like my father? Why my eyes are green when both my parents are brown? Why I'm left-handed when no one in the royal family has ever been?" Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. These were observations he had made over the years but had dismissed as coincidence. Royal bloodlines were complex after all. Traits could skip generations. "Your Highness, perhaps you should speak with the king about these concerns." "The king is dead, Marcus." The words hung in the air like a death knell. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. "What?" Charlotte's composure finally cracked, and tears began streaming down her face. "Father died in his sleep last night. Lord Pemberton found him this morning and immediately sealed the royal chambers. They're saying it was his heart, but—" She held up a piece of parchment with trembling hands. "This was delivered to me an hour ago." Marcus took the letter, his training overriding his shock. The parchment was expensive, the kind used by nobility, but there was no seal, no identifying mark. The message was written in elegant script. "Your Majesty, your father's death was not natural, and you are not his daughter. The truth lies in the sealed records of the Ashford Monastery, where a certain midwife's confession has waited 25 years to be revealed. If you value your life and the stability of the kingdom, you will not take the throne. Others have a stronger claim. A friend. Marcus read the letter twice, his mind racing. If this was true, if even part of this was true, the implications were staggering. Charlotte was the sole heir to the throne. Without her, the kingdom would fall into chaos, with various noble houses fighting for control. "Who else has seen this?" he asked. "Only Eleanor. She was with me when it arrived." Charlotte wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Marcus, what if it's true? What if I'm not the rightful heir? Your Highness, this could be the work of someone trying to destabilize the kingdom before your coronation. There are always those who profit from chaos." But, even as he spoke, Marcus remembered things that had always seemed odd. The way King Edmund sometimes looked at Charlotte with an expression that seemed more protective than paternal. The fact that Queen Isabella had died so soon after Charlotte's birth that few people had clear memories of the pregnancy. The way certain older courtiers would exchange meaningful glances when the subject of Charlotte's parentage came up. "We need to investigate this quietly," Marcus said. "If word of this letter spreads before we know the truth, it could tear the kingdom apart." Charlotte nodded, some of her royal composure returning. "What do you suggest?" "First, we need to secure your safety. If someone killed the king, you could be in danger. Second, we need to learn more about this monastery and these sealed records." A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus quickly pocketed the letter and moved to answer it. Lord Pemberton stood in the hallway, flanked by two guards Marcus didn't recognize. "Captain Blackwood," Pemberton said, his voice formal and cold. "I need to speak with Her Majesty immediately." Lord Pemberton was the king's chief advisor, a man in his 60s with silver hair and calculating eyes. He had always been polite to Charlotte, but Marcus had never trusted him completely. There was something too ambitious in his manner, too eager to please. "Of course, my lord," Marcus replied, though every instinct told him to refuse. Pemberton entered with his guards, and Marcus noticed how their hands rested near their weapons. These were not ceremonial guards. These were soldiers. "Your Majesty," Pemberton bowed deeply, "I'm afraid I bring terrible news. Your father, the king, passed away peacefully in his sleep last night." Charlotte performed her role perfectly, gasping and allowing tears to flow as if hearing the news for the first time. "How? He seemed so healthy yesterday." "His heart, I'm afraid." The physicians say it was mercifully quick. Pemberton's expression was appropriately somber, but Marcus caught something else in his eyes. Satisfaction? "Given the circumstances, I've taken the liberty of moving the coronation forward. You'll be crowned tomorrow evening." "Tomorrow?" Charlotte's surprise was genuine. "But that's impossible. There are protocols, preparations. In times of crisis, Majesty, we must adapt. The people need to see stability. They need to know the crown is secure." Pemberton smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I've already begun making the arrangements." Marcus felt alarm bells ringing in his mind. Moving the coronation forward meant fewer opportunities to investigate the letter's claims. It also meant less time for any opposition to organize. "Of course," Charlotte said carefully. "Whatever you think is best." "Excellent. I've also arranged for additional security, given the circumstances." He gestured to his guards. "These men will be taking over your protection immediately." "That won't be necessary." Marcus stepped forward. "I've protected Her Majesty for 20 years, and you've done admirably, Captain, but these are uncertain times. My men had experience with particular types of threats." The implication was clear. Marcus was being relieved of his duties. He looked at Charlotte, who gave the slightest nod. She wanted him to stand down, at least for now. "As you wish, my lord," Marcus said, though it pained him to step aside. After Pemberton and his men left, Marcus waited in the corridor, thinking furiously. Too many things were happening too quickly. The king's sudden death, the mysterious letter, Pemberton's eagerness to rush the coronation and replace Charlotte's security, it all felt orchestrated. Hours later, as the sun began to set, Marcus made his way to the servants' quarters. If anyone knew the palace's secrets, it would be the people who cleaned its rooms and served its meals. He found Sarah, an elderly maid who had served the royal family for 40 years. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I need to ask you about something that happened 25 years ago." The old woman's eyes grew wary.
"What kind of something?"
"Princess Charlotte's birth. Do you remember anything unusual about it?" Sarah glanced around nervously. "That's not something I should be talking about." "Sarah, the princess may be in danger. If you know something, anything, I need to hear it." The maid was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. There were rumors back then. Whispers in the servants' quarters. What kind of rumors? Queen Isabella had been trying to have a child for 7 years. When she finally got pregnant, she was so careful, so protective. But then she went away for the last month of her pregnancy. Said she wanted privacy, peace, and quiet. Where did she go? To her sister's estate near the Ashford Monastery. When she came back, she had a beautiful baby girl, but Sarah hesitated. But what? She died 3 days later. Childbed fever, they said, but she seemed fine when she returned. Happy, healthy. And the baby, Sarah shook her head. What about the baby? Princess Charlotte was the most beautiful infant I ever saw, perfect in every way. But she didn't cry the way newborns usually do. It was like she was older, more developed. And her eyes, they were already that deep green color. Most babies' eyes don't settle on their true color for months. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Did anyone else notice these things? A few of us did, but we knew better than to talk about it. The king was so happy to finally have an heir. Who were we to question God's blessing? What happened to the midwife who attended the birth? Sarah's expression grew darker. Sister Margaret from the monastery? She took vows of silence shortly after the princess was born. No one ever saw her again. Marcus thanked Sarah and made his way to his own quarters, his mind reeling. If the letter was true, if Charlotte wasn't the king's biological daughter, then who was she? And more importantly, who had the stronger claim mentioned in the letter? As he reached his room, he found Eleanor Whitmore waiting for him, her face streaked with tears. "Captain Blackwood," she whispered urgently. "I need your help. Charlotte has disappeared." Marcus felt his heart stop. What do you mean disappeared? Pemberton's guards came to escort her to dinner. When they opened her chambers, she was gone. The window was open, and there were signs of a struggle. Marcus was already moving, his hand on his sword. How long ago? An hour. Maybe less. Pemberton is organizing search parties, but what? Eleanor looked terrified. I heard one of his guards talking. They're not looking for her to rescue her, they're looking for her to silence her. Marcus realized the conspiracy was bigger than he had imagined. Pemberton wasn't just trying to rush the coronation, he was trying to eliminate Charlotte entirely. But if she wasn't the rightful heir, why go to such lengths? Unless there was more to the story, something that made her a threat even without the crown. Eleanor, I need you to do something for me, Marcus said. Go to the archives and find anything you can about Queen Isabella's pregnancy and Charlotte's birth. Look for travel records, medical reports, anything. Where are you going? To find our princess before Pemberton's men do. As Marcus prepared to leave the palace, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was already too late. Charlotte was out there somewhere, alone and vulnerable, with enemies closing in from all sides. The letter had spoken of truth and stronger claims, but Marcus was beginning to realize that the truth might be more dangerous than any lie. The game for the throne had begun, and the rules had already changed. Night was falling over Valdoria, and with it, the shadows were growing longer and darker. Somewhere in those shadows, a princess fought for her life, while the future of a kingdom hung in the balance. Marcus mounted his horse and rode into the darkness, praying he would find Charlotte before her enemies did. But as he left the palace behind, one question haunted him above all others. If Charlotte wasn't the rightful heir to the throne of Valdoria, then who was? The answer to that question would determine not just Charlotte's fate, but the destiny of an entire kingdom. And as Marcus would soon discover, some truths were worth killing for, while others were worth dying to protect. The royal guard stormed into the night, chasing shadows and secrets that had waited 25 years to see the light. Marcus rode hard through the cobblestone streets of the capital, his horse's hooves echoing against the buildings that lined the narrow lanes. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, casting the city in an eerie darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. He had no clear destination, only the desperate hope that Charlotte had managed to escape the palace and find somewhere safe to hide. The Ashford Monastery lay 15 miles north of the capital, nestled in the hills where Queen Isabella had supposedly spent her final month of pregnancy. It was the logical place to start looking for answers, but Marcus knew that Charlotte was too smart to go there directly. Pemberton's men would search there first. As he reached the outskirts of the city, Marcus pulled his horse to a stop and tried to think like Charlotte. Where would a princess go when her entire world collapsed around her? She had lived her life in luxury, surrounded by servants and guards, never needing to fend for herself. But Charlotte was also intelligent and resourceful. She would find a way to survive. A memory surfaced. Charlotte as a child, maybe 8 years old, talking excitedly about her favorite hiding place in the palace gardens. She had discovered a gardener's shed hidden behind the rose bushes, where she would go to read forbidden books and eat stolen pastries. Even then, she had shown a talent for finding safe spaces where no one would think to look. The thought sparked an idea. Charlotte wouldn't go somewhere obvious like an inn or a noble's estate. She would find somewhere ordinary, somewhere beneath notice. Marcus turned his horse toward the merchant district, where honest working people minded their own business and asked few questions. The streets were quieter here, with only the occasional drunk stumbling home from the taverns. Marcus dismounted and began walking, leading his horse and listening carefully for any sounds that might indicate a disturbance. He checked several inns and boarding houses, describing Charlotte as his wayward daughter who had run away after a family argument. Most innkeepers shook their heads sympathetically, but had seen nothing. It was at the fourth establishment, a modest inn called the Merchant's Rest, that Marcus finally got a lead. The innkeeper, a stout woman with graying hair and kind eyes, hesitated when he described Charlotte. "Can't say I've seen anyone matching that description," she said carefully, but her eyes darted briefly toward the stairs leading to the upper rooms. Marcus placed a gold coin on the counter. "I'm not here to cause trouble. The girl is in danger and I'm trying to help her." The innkeeper studied him for a long moment, taking in his worn but well-made clothes and the calluses on his hands from years of sword work. Finally, she sighed and pocketed the coin. "Room 7 at the end of the hall. But if you're planning to hurt that child, you'll answer to me and my husband. I give you my word, I'm here to protect her." Marcus climbed the narrow stairs, his heart pounding. When he reached room 7, he knocked softly and spoke in a low voice. "Charlotte, it's Marcus. You're safe." There was a long pause, then the sound of furniture being moved away from the door. When it finally opened, Marcus saw Charlotte's tear-streaked face peering out at him. She was still wearing her nightgown under a rough brown cloak that looked like it had been borrowed from a servant. "Marcus!" She fell into his arms, sobbing with relief. I didn't know who else to trust. He guided her back into the small room and barricaded the door again. Charlotte sat heavily on the narrow bed, looking fragile and lost. "How did you escape?" Marcus asked. "Through the servants' passages. Father showed them to me when I was young, in case of emergencies." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I heard Pemberton's men talking outside my door. They weren't planning to escort me to dinner. They were going to make it look like I had taken my own life out of grief for my father." Marcus felt rage building in his chest. "Eleanor told me there were signs of a struggle. I made it look that way. Overturned some furniture, left the window open. I wanted them to think I had jumped or been taken." Charlotte's voice was stronger now, more like the Princess Marcus remembered. "I took the servants' stairs down to the kitchens, borrowed this cloak from a scullery maid, and slipped out with the evening's waste collectors." "Clever," Marcus said with genuine admiration. "But we can't stay here long. Pemberton will have men searching the entire city soon." Charlotte nodded. "I've been thinking about that letter, Marcus. About the monastery and the sealed records. Even if it means giving up my claim to the throne, I need to know the truth. Your Highness, Charlotte," she interrupted. "If I'm not really a princess, then I should stop acting like one." Marcus knelt beside her bed. "You are a princess, in every way that matters. Your bloodline doesn't determine your worth or your right to lead. But it determines my legal right to the throne," Charlotte said quietly. "And if there's someone else with a stronger claim, someone who Pemberton is working with, then my taking the crown could start a civil war." Before Marcus could respond, they heard the sound of horses approaching the inn. He moved to the window and carefully peered out through the curtains. A dozen mounted soldiers were gathering in the street below, their armor gleaming in the torchlight. "Pemberton's men," Marcus whispered. "We need to go. Now." Charlotte was already moving, gathering her few possessions. Marcus led her to the room's single window, which faced the alley behind the inn. It was a 10-foot drop to the ground, but manageable. "I'll go first," he said, swinging his leg over the sill. "Then I'll catch you." He dropped to the cobblestones and turned to help Charlotte down. She landed gracefully despite her long skirts, and together they crept through the shadows toward where Marcus had left his horse. "We need another horse," Charlotte whispered. "One horse won't carry us both fast enough." Marcus was about to respond when they heard shouts from inside the inn. Pemberton's men had found their room. "This way!" Charlotte tugged his arm, leading him deeper into the alley. "I saw a stable when I arrived. They found the stable 2 blocks away. where the inn kept horses for travelers. Marcus quickly saddled 2 horses while Charlotte stood watch. As they prepared to mount, footsteps echoed from the mouth of the alley. "Search every building," a gruff voice commanded. "Lord Pemberton wants them found before dawn." Marcus helped Charlotte onto her horse and they rode carefully through the back alleys, avoiding the main roads where Pemberton's patrols would be watching. As they reached the edge of the city, Charlotte spoke up. "The monastery is too obvious. They'll be waiting for us there." "I know," Marcus replied. "But there might be another way to get the information we need." He told her about his conversation with Sarah, the elderly maid who remembered the strange circumstances of Charlotte's birth. "Sister Margaret, the midwife," Charlotte mused. "If she's still alive, she might be the only person who knows the truth, assuming we can find her, and assuming she's willing to talk." They rode north through the countryside, keeping to small paths and avoiding the main roads. As the first light of dawn began to touch the eastern horizon, they found themselves in the hills surrounding the Ashford Monastery. The ancient stone buildings rose from the mist like something from a dream, their bell towers reaching toward the heavens. "We can't approach directly," Marcus said. "Pemberton will have men watching the monastery." "Then how do we find Sister Margaret?" Marcus studied the terrain around them. The monastery was built on a hill, surrounded by dense woods and rocky outcroppings. There were several smaller buildings scattered throughout the area, hermitages and retreat houses where the most devout monks and nuns lived in solitude. If Sister Margaret took vows of silence 25 years ago, she might be living as a hermit, Marcus said. Away from the main buildings, they left their horses hidden in a grove of trees and began exploring the area on foot. Charlotte proved surprisingly adept at moving quietly through the underbrush, her years of palace life having included lessons in hunting and outdoor skills that served her well now. They found the first hermitage empty except for dust and cobwebs. The second showed signs of recent habitation but was currently vacant. It was at the third small stone cottage, nestled in a valley between 2 hills, that they struck gold. Smoke was rising from the chimney, and a small garden showed signs of careful tending. As they approached, an elderly woman emerged from the cottage carrying a basket of herbs. She was dressed in the simple brown robes of a nun, her hair covered by a white veil. When she saw them, she froze like a deer caught by hunters. "Sister Margaret," Charlotte called softly. The woman dropped her basket, herbs scattering across the ground. For a moment, Marcus thought she might run. Then she looked directly at Charlotte, and her weathered face went pale. "Holy Mother of God," she whispered. "You look just like her." "Like who?" Charlotte asked, stepping closer. "Like your mother. Your real mother." Sister Margaret's voice was barely audible. "I've been waiting 25 years for this day, child. Waiting and praying and hoping I would live long enough to tell the truth." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. This was it, the moment when all the secrets would finally be revealed. "Will you tell us what really happened?" Charlotte asked. Sister Margaret looked around nervously, as if expecting soldiers to emerge from the woods at any moment. "Not here. It's not safe. But there's a place, a cave in the hills where I go to pray. No one knows about it except me." She led them up a winding path that seemed to have been carved from the hillside itself. The cave was hidden behind a curtain of vines, its entrance so narrow that they had to enter single file. Inside, the space opened into a natural cathedral, with shafts of sunlight filtering down through cracks in the rock ceiling. Sister Margaret knelt before a simple wooden cross and began to pray silently. Marcus and Charlotte waited, understanding that this moment required patience and reverence. Finally, the nun turned to face them. 25 years ago, I was the head midwife at the monastery," she began. "I had delivered hundreds of babies, helped dozens of mothers through difficult births. But what happened that night, it changed everything I believed about duty and loyalty." Charlotte sat on a stone ledge, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Please, tell us everything." Sister Margaret closed her eyes, as if gathering strength from memory. "Queen Isabella did come here during her pregnancy, just as the records show. But she wasn't pregnant with her own child. She was carrying a child for another woman, a woman who couldn't raise the baby herself." Marcus felt the world shift around him. "Carrying a child for another woman? You mean the Queen was barren?" Sister Margaret said simply. 7 years of trying, of praying, of consulting physicians, and nothing. She and the king were desperate for an heir. So when the opportunity arose to claim another woman's child as their own, they took it. "Who was my real mother?" Charlotte's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the effort it cost her. "Lady Catherine Ashford, the Queen's younger sister. Catherine had fallen in love with a traveling scholar, a man of no noble birth but great learning and character. When she became pregnant, it would have been a scandal that could have destroyed both families. The pieces were beginning to fall into place in Marcus's mind. So the Queen pretended to be pregnant while her sister actually carried the child? Isabella wore padding beneath her dresses, avoided public appearances, claimed various ailments that required rest. Meanwhile, Catherine lived here at the monastery, hidden away from the world. Sister Margaret's voice grew heavy with old sorrow. The plan was for Catherine to give birth, then disappear. The child would be presented as the Queen's, and everyone would be satisfied. But something went wrong, Charlotte said. Catherine died in childbirth, Sister Margaret whispered. There were complications I should have been able to handle, but the stress of the deception, the fear, the secrecy, it all took a toll on her body. She bled too much too quickly. Tears were streaming down Charlotte's face now. My mother died giving birth to me? Your mother loved you more than life itself, Sister Margaret said firmly. Her last words were about you. How beautiful you were. How you would grow up to be strong and wise and good. She made me promise to keep the secret, to let you live as a princess rather than a bastard orphan. Marcus felt a deep sadness settling over him.
Charlotte's entire life had been built on a foundation of lies, but lies told out of love and desperation.
But if Charlotte is illegitimate, he said slowly, then she has no claim to the throne at all. Sister Margaret shook her head.
That's not entirely true. King Edmund officially acknowledged her as his daughter and heir. In the eyes of the law, she is legitimate, but... She hesitated. But what? Lady Catherine wasn't the only one who had a relationship with the scholar. There was another woman, one who also bore his child around the same time. A child who was raised in secret, away from court. Marcus felt cold understanding wash over him. Another child? A son, Sister Margaret confirmed. Born 3 days before Charlotte. Hidden away and raised as a commoner, but with a bloodline that could challenge Charlotte's claim if the truth ever came out. Who is he? Charlotte asked. Where is he now? Before Sister Margaret could answer, they heard the sound of horses approaching through the woods. Marcus drew his sword and moved to the cave entrance, peering through the vines. Pemberton's soldiers were surrounding the area, their armor glinting in the morning sun. At their head rode Lord Pemberton himself, his face grim with determination. How did they find us? Charlotte whispered. Sister Margaret looked stricken. I'm sorry, child. They came to me yesterday, threatened to burn down the monastery if I didn't cooperate. I sent word when you arrived. Marcus felt betrayed but understood the impossible position the nun had been in. Is there another way out of this cave? No, Sister Margaret said. But there's something else you need to know before they take you. The scholar, your father, he didn't just father 2 children and disappear. He stayed close, watching over both his son and his daughter from a distance. He's still alive? Charlotte asked. Very much so, Sister Margaret said. And he's been waiting for this day just as I have. The son he raised in secret has grown into a man of honor and capability. If something happens to you, Charlotte, he's prepared to claim his rightful place. Marcus heard Pemberton's voice shouting orders outside. They were running out of time. What's his name? Charlotte asked urgently. Where can we find him? Sister Margaret smiled sadly. You already have, child. You've known him for years. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the cave entrance. Marcus gripped his sword tighter, preparing for what might be their final fight. But as Pemberton's men discovered the cave and began to enter, Sister Margaret spoke one last time, her words changing everything Marcus thought he knew about loyalty, identity, and the true meaning of royal blood. The scholar's son, she said, the man who shares your father and your birthright, is Captain Marcus Blackwood. Marcus felt the world stop spinning. Everything he had believed about himself, about his life, about his relationship with Charlotte, shattered like glass. He wasn't just her protector, he was her half-brother and, legally speaking, the rightful heir to the throne of Valdoria. As Pemberton's men burst into the cave with swords drawn, Marcus realized that the game for the crown had just become far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The world seemed to move in slow motion as Pemberton's soldiers poured into the cave. Marcus stood frozen, his sword half drawn, Sister Margaret's revelation echoing in his mind like thunder. He was Charlotte's brother, her half-brother, the rightful heir to the throne. Drop your weapon, Captain, Pemberton commanded from the cave entrance, his own sword gleaming in the filtered sunlight. There's nowhere to run. Marcus looked at Charlotte, who stared back at him with wide, shocked eyes. The family resemblance was suddenly obvious now that they knew to look for it. The same strong jawline, the same intelligent eyes, even the same way they held their heads when thinking. How had no one noticed before? Is it true? Charlotte whispered. Are you really my brother? Before Marcus could answer, Sister Margaret stepped forward, her frail body positioning itself between the soldiers and the siblings. Lord Pemberton, she said with surprising strength in her voice, you're too late.
The truth has been spoken. Pemberton's face darkened. The truth is what I say it is, sister.
I endeavor to enable people to Meredith.
And the truth is that Princess Charlotte took her own life out of grief for her father, and Captain Blackwood died trying to save her. You can't kill us all, Marcus said, finally finding his voice. Too many people know we're here. Actually, I can, Pemberton replied coldly. A tragic accident in the caves. These old tunnels are notoriously unstable. A small explosion, perhaps some Greek fire, and the whole hillside comes down. Marcus realized that Pemberton had planned for every contingency. The advisor's ambition ran deeper than anyone had suspected, and he was willing to commit mass murder to achieve his goals. Why? Charlotte asked, stepping forward despite the danger. Why kill my father? Why destroy the kingdom for your own gain? Pemberton laughed, the sound echoing harshly off the cave walls. My own gain? Child, you understand nothing about what's really happening here. He gestured to his men, who began spreading out to surround their prisoners. Marcus counted 8 soldiers, all heavily armed and experienced. Even with the cave's narrow passages limiting their movement, the odds were overwhelming. I'm not doing this for myself, Pemberton continued. I'm doing this for the true King of Valdoria, the man who should have inherited the throne 25 years ago. What true king? Marcus demanded. King Edmund had no brothers, no male cousins. King Edmund was never the rightful heir either, Pemberton said. His father usurped the throne from the legitimate royal line 50 years ago. The real royal family has been in exile ever since, waiting for their chance to reclaim what was stolen from them. Sister Margaret gasped. Prince Adrian's line. I thought they were all dead. Not all, Pemberton smiled coldly. Prince Adrian's grandson survived, was raised in secret by loyal nobles. He's returned to claim his birthright, and he has the documents to prove his legitimacy. Documents that make both Edmund's line and any bastard children irrelevant. Marcus felt the political implications hitting him like a series of physical blows. If there truly was a surviving member of the pre-Edmund royal line, then Charlotte's legitimacy as heir was meaningless. But more than that, if this pretender had Pemberton's support and the backing of powerful nobles, he could plunge the kingdom into civil war. Where is this supposed true king now? Charlotte asked. Waiting in the capital with an army of loyalists, Pemberton replied. By tomorrow night he'll be crowned King Adrian IV, and this unfortunate business with pretender princesses will be finished. Marcus saw Charlotte's shoulders straighten, her royal training taking over even in the face of death. The people will never accept an unknown foreigner over someone they've known and loved since childhood. They will when they learn the truth about your parentage, Pemberton said. When they discover that their beloved princess is nothing but a bastard impostor whose very existence is built on lies. And what about Marcus? Sister Margaret spoke up unexpectedly. Will you tell them that the true heir to Edmund's line still lives? Pemberton's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about, old woman? Captain Blackwood is not just Charlotte's protector. He's her half-brother, born of the same father, but 3 days earlier. If you're going to honor bloodlines, then he has the stronger claim to Edmund's throne. Marcus saw uncertainty flicker across Pemberton's face. This was clearly not part of his plan. Lies, Pemberton said, but his voice lacked conviction. The captain is a commoner, born to a seamstress in the lower districts. His mother was a seamstress, Sister Margaret agreed. But his father was the same scholar who fathered Charlotte. A man of noble birth who gave up his title for love and learning. Marcus felt pieces of his own past clicking into place. His mother had always been secretive about his father, claiming only that he was a good man who had died when Marcus was young. But she had insisted on educating him far beyond what a seamstress could normally afford, hiring tutors to teach him reading, writing, mathematics, and swordplay. She had told him it was because she wanted him to rise above his station, but now Marcus wondered if she had known the truth about his parentage. Even if that were true, Pemberton said, it changes nothing. Adrian's claim predates any of Edmund's line, legitimate or bastard. Perhaps, Marcus said, an idea forming in his mind. But the people don't know about this Adrian yet. Right now, as far as they're concerned, I'm just a loyal captain who has served the crown faithfully for 20 years. What do you think they'll believe? That I'm a traitor conspiring with a bastard princess, or that you murdered their beloved king and princess for your own ambitious plans?
Pemberton's face flushed red.
It doesn't matter what they believe. They'll believe what they're told. Will they? Charlotte stepped up beside Marcus, and he could see her mind working rapidly.
Marcus, how many of the palace guards are loyal to you personally?
Most of them, Marcus replied, understanding where she was going with this. I've served alongside them for years.
They trust me. And how many of the noble houses have daughters who might serve as potential brides for this mysterious Prince Adrian? Marcus smiled grimly. Charlotte was thinking like a true politician now. None of the major houses. They all have marriage alliances planned based on the current political structure. Pemberton was beginning to look less confident. You're stalling. It won't work. Actually, I think we're highlighting some serious flaws in your plan, Charlotte said. You're asking the entire kingdom to accept massive changes based on 50-year-old documents and the word of a man no one has ever heard of. Meanwhile, you've murdered a popular king and are planning to kill his beloved daughter. Do you really think that will lead to a stable transition of power? One of Pemberton's soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Marcus noticed the man's uncertainty and pressed the advantage. What about you men? He called to the soldiers. Have any of you actually seen these documents proving Prince Adrian's claim? Or are you taking Lord Pemberton's word for it? Silence! Pemberton snapped, but Marcus could see doubt spreading among the soldiers. I've served with some of you, Marcus continued. You know I'm a man of honor. Why would I lie about something like this? Because you're trying to save your own life. One of the soldiers said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Marcus spread his arms wide, making himself an easy target. If I were really a traitor, would I have spent 20 years protecting Princess Charlotte? Would I have turned down dozens of opportunities for advancement to stay by her side? Sister Margaret spoke up again. Perhaps we should let the people decide. Let Captain Blackwood present his case to the kingdom. Let them choose between competing claims. There will be no choosing, Pemberton snarled. The decision has been made. But Marcus could see that the soldiers were wavering. These were professional men who had sworn oaths to protect the kingdom, and they were beginning to realize that they might be on the wrong side of history. Lord Pemberton, one of the soldiers said hesitantly, perhaps we should consider... We consider nothing. Pemberton drew his sword and pointed it at Charlotte's throat. The pretender dies now, and this farce ends. Marcus moved without thinking, his own blade coming up to block Pemberton's strike. Steel rang against steel in the confined space of the cave, and suddenly the air was filled with the sound of combat. Charlotte rolled away from the fighting, pressing herself against the cave wall. Sister Margaret began praying loudly, her voice rising above the clash of weapons. The soldiers stood frozen, unsure which side to take. Marcus had always been one of the finest swordsmen in the kingdom, but Pemberton was no courtier with a decorative blade. The advisor had clearly been trained by masters, and his technique was flawless. They fought back and forth across the cave floor, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. You cannot stop this! Pemberton gasped between strikes. Adrian's army is already marching on the capital. Then we'll stop them too, Marcus replied, pressing his attack. As they fought, Charlotte made a decision that would change everything. Instead of cowering in the corner, she began speaking to Pemberton's soldiers. Look at this, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the cave. Look at what Lord Pemberton is willing to do to claim power. He murdered my father in his sleep, tried to have me killed in my own chambers, and now he's fighting my protector in a sacred place. Is this the behavior of a righteous man serving the true king? Some of the soldiers exchanged glances, and Marcus could see their loyalty wavering. My friends, Charlotte continued, you swore an oath to protect the kingdom of Valdoria. Not to serve any particular king or noble, but to protect the land and people you love. Ask yourselves, who truly serves Valdoria here? A man who brings foreign armies and civil war, or those who seek to preserve the peace and stability you've fought to maintain? Marcus managed to drive Pemberton back with a series of quick strikes, but the advisor recovered quickly and launched a renewed assault. Their blades locked at the crossguards, bringing them face to face. You think you've won something? Pemberton hissed. Even if you kill me, Adrian's forces are already in position. The kingdom will burn regardless. But at least it won't burn because of my betrayal. He broke the lock and spun away, his blade scoring a shallow cut across Pemberton's sword arm. The advisor cursed and switched his grip, but Marcus could see that the wound was affecting his technique. "Captain Blackwood," one of the soldiers suddenly called out. "If what you say is true, if you're really the rightful heir, then we should be protecting you, not fighting you." "I don't want protection," Marcus replied without taking his eyes off Pemberton. "I want justice for my king and safety for my sister." The word sister seemed to resonate with the soldiers. Several of them lowered their weapons entirely. "Stand down," the lead soldier commanded his men. "Until we know the truth, we do not act against the royal family." Pemberton's face contorted with rage. "Fools, you'll destroy everything." He launched himself at Marcus in a desperate final attack, abandoning all defensive technique in favor of raw aggression. Marcus sidestepped the charge and brought his pommel down hard on the back of Pemberton's skull. The advisor collapsed to the cave floor, unconscious but breathing. In the sudden silence that followed, Marcus looked around at the assembled group. Charlotte was staring at him with a mixture of admiration and something else he couldn't quite identify. The soldiers stood at attention, waiting for orders. Sister Margaret continued her prayers, but her voice had taken on a tone of gratitude rather than desperation. "What now?" Charlotte asked quietly. Marcus sheathed his sword and knelt beside Pemberton's unconscious form, checking his pulse to make sure he hadn't killed the man. "Now we return to the capital and deal with this Prince Adrian," he said. "But first, we need to gather evidence of what really happened to your father." "And then?" Marcus looked at his sister. The word still felt strange in his mind, and made a decision that surprised even him. "Then you take your rightful place on the throne, and we worry about bloodlines and legitimacy later. The kingdom needs stability more than it needs royal purity." Charlotte's eyes widened. "But you're the true heir." The elder child. "I'm a soldier, Charlotte. I know how to follow orders and swing a sword. You've been trained to rule since birth. You have the education, the political knowledge, and the relationships with the noble houses. More importantly, the people love you." Marcus. "Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I've spent 20 years protecting the rightful ruler of Valdoria. I'm not about to stop now." One of the soldiers spoke up. "Captain, what about Lord Pemberton?" "And this Prince Adrian?" Marcus looked down at the unconscious advisor, then back at his men. "We take Pemberton back to the capital as our prisoner." As for Prince Adrian, Marcus's expression hardened. "Well, we'll see just how legitimate his claim really is when he has to face the combined forces of the Royal Guard and whoever still remains loyal to the true crown." As they prepared to leave the cave, Sister Margaret approached Charlotte and pressed something into her hand, a small silver locket. "This belonged to your mother," she said softly. "Lady Catherine wore it always. Inside, you'll find a portrait of your father, the scholar who gave you life, if not legitimacy." Charlotte opened the locket with trembling fingers, revealing a tiny painted portrait of a man with kind eyes and Marcus's strong jawline. For the first time since the ordeal began, she smiled. "He looks like you," she said to Marcus. "He looks like both of us," Marcus replied. As they emerged from the cave into the afternoon sunlight, Marcus felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. He was no longer just a guard protecting a princess. He was a brother defending his sister's right to rule, a subject fighting to preserve his kingdom, and a bastard son who might be the key to preventing civil war. The ride back to the capital would give them time to plan, but Marcus knew that the real battle was just beginning. Prince Adrian's army was waiting, and there was no telling how many nobles had already thrown their support behind this mysterious pretender. But as he looked at Charlotte riding beside him, her royal composure restored and her determination evident in every line of her body, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in days. Hope. The rightful ruler of Valdoria was returning to claim her throne, and this time she wouldn't be facing her enemies alone. The game for the crown was entering its final phase, and Marcus Blackwood, bastard son, royal guard, and unexpected prince, was determined to make sure the right side won. The journey back to the capital took on the quality of a military expedition as word of their approach spread through the countryside. What had begun as 3 fugitives and a handful of soldiers had grown into a small army by the time they reached the outskirts of Valdoria City. Marcus rode at the head of the column, his armor polished and his captain's insignia displayed prominently. Beside him, Charlotte wore a traveling dress of royal blue that Lady Eleanor had somehow procured along the way. Her golden hair braided with silver ribbon that caught the afternoon light. Behind them rode nearly 200 soldiers, knights and armed civilians who had declared their loyalty to the rightful queen. The transformation had been remarkable. As news spread that Princess Charlotte lived and that Captain Blackwood rode with evidence of Lord Pemberton's treachery, support had materialized from unexpected quarters. Sir Thomas Aldrich, the grizzled commander of the northern fortress, had arrived with 50 mounted knights. Lady Catherine Winters, whose husband served in the Royal Council, had brought 30 crossbowmen and crucial intelligence about the political situation in the capital. Your Highness, Lady Catherine rode up alongside Charlotte, her expression grim. I have disturbing news from the city. Charlotte turned in her saddle, every inch the queen despite the circumstances. What have you learned? Prince Adrian has indeed taken residence in the palace. He's announced that you and your father died in a tragic accident, and that he is assuming the throne to prevent chaos. Worse, he's brought foreign mercenaries, nearly 500 Mercian soldiers who have no loyalty to our people. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Mercians were skilled fighters but notorious for their brutality towards civilians. What about the city guard?
The palace garrison? Split, Lady Catherine replied. About half have declared for Adrian, either out of fear or because they believe his claim is legitimate.
The other half are holed up in the eastern barracks, refusing to acknowledge his authority. And the noble houses? Charlotte asked. Most are staying neutral until they see how this plays out. Lord Pemberton's supporters are few, but they include some influential families. The Ashfords, ironically, are backing Adrian strongly. Apparently they believe supporting a pure bloodline will restore their own family's position. Marcus noticed Charlotte flinch slightly at the mention of the Ashfords. It was a cruel irony that her mother's family would oppose her claim. What about the people? He asked. Lady Catherine's expression brightened slightly. That's where our hope lies. Word has spread that Lord Pemberton murdered King Edmund, and the common folk are furious. There have been demonstrations in the market squares, and several merchants have refused to provide supplies to Adrian's forces. Charlotte was quiet for a moment, processing the information. Then she spoke with the authority Marcus had always known she possessed. We need to divide our approach, she said. We can't simply march on the palace with military force. Too many innocents could be caught in the fighting. But we also can't allow Adrian to consolidate his power. What do you suggest? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew her thinking. A formal challenge, Charlotte replied. I'll present myself at the palace gates and publicly claim my rightful throne. Force Adrian to either acknowledge my legitimacy or deny it before witnesses. Sir Thomas Aldrich, who had been listening to the conversation, shook his head vigorously. Your Highness, that's incredibly dangerous. Adrian's mercenaries won't hesitate to cut you down where you stand. Perhaps, Charlotte said calmly. But not if I arrive with enough supporters to make my murder obviously illegitimate, and not if I can force the confrontation to take place before the entire court. Marcus understood her strategy immediately. You want to challenge him to prove his claim publicly. Make him present those documents Sister Margaret mentioned. Let the nobles and people judge for themselves. Exactly. Adrian's power comes from secrecy and uncertainty. If we can force everything into the open, his advantages disappear. Lady Catherine looked thoughtful. It could work. The old laws do allow for challenges to succession, especially when there are questions of legitimacy. But you'd need to follow the proper protocols. Which are? Charlotte asked. You must present yourself at the throne room during a formal court session, declare your identity and claim, and demand the right of succession challenge. If Adrian refuses, he essentially admits his claim is weak. Marcus could see the political brilliance of the plan, but it terrified him from a security standpoint. Charlotte, you'd be putting yourself completely at his mercy. One word from him and his guards could kill you before anyone could react.
Not if I'm not alone, she replied with a slight smile.
Marcus, you're coming with me. As my protector and my brother.
Your brother?
Sir Thomas looked confused. Charlotte quickly explained the revelation about Marcus's parentage. The old knight's eyes widened with understanding, then calculation. By the old laws, Sir Thomas said slowly, if Captain Blackwood is indeed the elder child, he would have the stronger claim to the throne. Which is exactly why I'm not pursuing it, Marcus said firmly. Charlotte is the rightful queen in every way that matters. But your claim could be crucial, Lady Catherine interjected. If Adrian's documents are somehow legitimate, having an alternative claimant from Edmund's line could prevent civil war. As they crested the final hill before the capital, Marcus saw the city spread out below them. Valdoria had been his home for 20 years, but now it looked different somehow. More fragile, more precious. Smoke rose from several districts, suggesting that the political tension had already sparked some violence. "Look there!" Charlotte pointed toward the palace. "Adrian's banner flies above the royal towers." Marcus could see it clearly, a silver dragon on a black field, completely different from the golden lion that had represented the royal house for 50 years. The symbolism was deliberate and unmistakable. The old order was dead, and a new power had taken its place. "He's moving quickly," Sir Thomas observed. "That suggests either confidence or desperation." "Both, I suspect," Charlotte said. "He knows his window of opportunity is limited. The longer people have to think about his claims, the more questions they'll ask." As they descended toward the city, Marcus noticed that their column was drawing attention. People lined the roads, many calling out Charlotte's name or cheering when they recognized her. Others looked uncertain or afraid, clearly confused by the competing claims and conflicting reports. "Your Highness," one of Marcus's lieutenants rode up with urgent news. "Scouts report that Adrian's forces are taking defensive positions around the palace. They're not planning to come out and meet us." "Smart of them," Marcus muttered. "They want us to attack first, to look like the aggressors." Charlotte nodded. "Which is exactly why we're not going to attack. We're going to walk up to the front gates and demand entry, as is our right." "That's suicide," Sir Thomas protested.
"No," Charlotte said with quiet confidence. "That's politics." They made camp in the grand square that faced the palace gates, a space traditionally used for royal ceremonies and public celebrations.
The symbolism was perfect. Charlotte was literally returning to her rightful place, claiming the very ground where she had been presented to the people as an infant. As word spread through the city that Princess Charlotte had returned and was preparing to challenge the usurper's claim, crowds began to gather. Marcus was amazed by the number of people who appeared, many carrying flowers or small tokens of loyalty. The demonstration of popular support was exactly what Charlotte had hoped for, but Adrian's response was swift and intimidating. By evening, his Mercian soldiers had taken positions along the palace walls, their crossbows clearly visible to anyone in the square. The message was obvious: approach at your own risk. As night fell, Marcus and Charlotte sat in the command tent that had been erected in the center of their camp. Maps of the palace and city were spread across a wooden table, illuminated by flickering candles. "He's not going to let us simply walk in tomorrow," Marcus said, studying the defensive positions his scouts had reported. "I know," Charlotte replied. "But he also can't simply refuse to see us. Too many people know I'm here now. If he murders me publicly, it will destroy any legitimacy he might claim. Unless he believes he can make it look justified. Paint you as a traitor or a pretender." Charlotte was quiet for a moment, then reached into her saddlebag and withdrew the silver locket Sister Margaret had given her. She opened it and stared at the portrait of their father. "Marcus, do you ever think about what our lives might have been like if things had been different? If we'd grown up knowing we were siblings?" Marcus looked at his sister. Still strange to think of her that way, and felt a deep sadness for all the lost years. "Every day since Sister Margaret told us the truth. But I think maybe things happened the way they were supposed to." "How can you say that? We've both lived lies our entire lives." "Have we?" Marcus leaned back in his chair. "You were raised as a princess and became a true leader. I was raised as a commoner and learned the value of service and loyalty. If we'd known the truth from the beginning, would we be the same people we are now?" Charlotte considered this. "I suppose not." "But don't you feel cheated?" "You could have been a prince," Marcus laughed softly. "Charlotte, I've spent 20 years watching princes and nobles. Most of them are pampered fools who've never done an honest day's work in their lives. I'd rather be a man of honor who happened to be born a bastard than a prince who's never earned anything." "But you have earned something," Charlotte said intently. "You've earned the right to rule. The people would follow you, Marcus. You've proven yourself in ways I never have, and you've been trained to lead in ways I never was. Charlotte, tomorrow when we face Adrian, we're going to be stronger together than either of us could be alone. You have the legal claim, the royal training, and the people's love. I have the military experience, the loyalty of the guards, and apparently a bloodline that gives us alternatives if his documents prove legitimate." Before Charlotte could respond, Lady Catherine burst into the tent with urgent news. "Your Highness, Adrian has agreed to meet with you tomorrow at noon in the throne room with the full court in attendance. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. What are the terms? You may bring 10 companions as witnesses and protection. He's promised safe passage in and out of the palace, sworn before the court. And what does he expect in return? Charlotte asked. That you come prepared to either prove your legitimacy or withdraw your claim permanently. Marcus could see the trap immediately. He's planning something. This is too easy. Of course he is, Charlotte said calmly. But it's also an opportunity. If we can expose his deception before the full court, his support will crumble. Lady Catherine hesitated. There's something else. Adrian has announced that he has irrefutable proof not only of his own legitimacy, but of your irregular birth circumstances. Charlotte's face went pale. He knows about my parentage. He claims to have documentation proving that you're not King Edmund's biological daughter. If he presents that evidence before the court, Marcus felt cold understanding wash over him. This was Adrian's real strategy. He didn't need to prove his own claim was stronger. He just needed to prove that Charlotte's claim was non-existent. How could he know? Charlotte whispered. The only people who knew the truth were Sister Margaret, and she would never... Pemberton, Marcus said grimly. He must have forced the information out of someone before we captured him. Or maybe he's been investigating this for longer than we realized. Charlotte stood up and began pacing the small tent. So tomorrow, I walk into the throne room knowing that Adrian can destroy my claim with a few pieces of paper.
Not necessarily, Marcus said, an idea forming in his mind.
What if we get there first? What do you mean? What if we present the truth ourselves, on our own terms? Tell the story of your parents' love and sacrifice. Frame it as a tale of devotion to the kingdom, rather than deception. Lady Catherine looked intrigued. And present Marcus's claim as the backup? Show that even if Charlotte's legitimacy is questioned, the bloodline continues through him? Exactly. We control the narrative instead of reacting to Adrian's accusations. Charlotte stopped pacing and turned to face them both. It's risky. We'd be gambling everything on the court's reaction. We're gambling everything anyway, Marcus pointed out. At least this way we're playing offense instead of defense. Charlotte was quiet for a long moment, then nodded decisively. Very well. Tomorrow we go to the throne room, and we tell the complete truth. All of it. Let the court decide who is worthy to rule based on character and capability, not just bloodlines. As they spent the rest of the evening planning their approach, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. Adrian's confidence seemed too complete. His willingness to face them in open court, too convenient. But it was too late to change course now. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation, and the fate of the kingdom would be decided by words rather than swords. Marcus just hoped they had chosen the right words to save the crown and their lives. The throne room of Valdoria Palace had never seemed more imposing. Ancient banners hung from the vaulted ceiling, their colors muted by decades of ceremonial candle smoke. The great throne, carved from a single piece of black marble and inlaid with gold, sat at the far end of the hall like a judgment seat. But it was the man sitting upon it that drew every eye in the room. Prince Adrian was not what Marcus had expected. Rather than the foreign usurper he had imagined, Adrian appeared to be a man in his early 30s with distinctly Valdorian features. Dark hair, olive skin, and intelligent brown eyes. He wore robes of royal purple with the silver dragon emblem prominent on his chest, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone born to rule. Marcus walked beside Charlotte as they approached the throne, their 10 chosen companions flanking them in a protective formation. The throne room was packed with courtiers, nobles, merchants, and citizens who had managed to gain entry. Every face in the crowd was tense with anticipation. "Your Majesty," Charlotte said when they reached the prescribed distance from the throne, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. She did not bow, a deliberate statement that she did not recognize Adrian's authority. Adrian leaned forward slightly, studying Charlotte with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. "So you are the young woman who claims to be Princess Charlotte of Valdoria." "I am Charlotte of Valdoria," she replied simply, "daughter of King Edmund, heir to the throne by right of birth and acknowledgement." A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Adrian raised his hand for silence. "Yes, about that," he said, his tone conversational but carrying an undertone of steel. "I have some documents here that raise interesting questions about your parentage. Perhaps we should examine them together?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten. This was exactly what they had expected, but hearing it spoken aloud in front of the entire court was still jarring.
Before we examine anything, Charlotte said, her royal training evident in every word, perhaps you should present your own credentials.
By what right do you claim the throne of Valdoria? Adrian smiled, apparently pleased by the question. An excellent point. He gestured to a man standing beside the throne, an elderly scholar with arms full of documents. Master Benedict here is our royal genealogist. He has spent considerable time researching the true lineage of Valdoria's crown. The scholar stepped forward and unrolled a large parchment. My lords and ladies, he began in a voice trained to carry. 50 years ago, King Edmund's father, Prince Harold, usurped the throne from the rightful king, his elder brother, Prince Adrian III. Prince Adrian was forced into exile but maintained his claim until his death. That claim has now passed to his grandson, the man you see before you.
Marcus studied the document being displayed. Even from a distance it looked genuine. Old parchment, official seals, the kind of elaborate script used in royal documents.
But authenticity could be faked, especially by someone with resources.
Impressive documents, Charlotte said, calmly.
But surely you have more than papers to support your claim. Witnesses? Evidence of your grandfather's life in exile?
Indeed I do. Adrian stood from the throne and walked down the steps toward them. As he moved, Marcus noted that he carried himself like a trained warrior, despite his scholarly appearance. I was raised by Lord Pemberton, who was my grandfather's most loyal supporter. He has spent decades preparing for my return.
Marcus felt a chill of understanding.
Pemberton hadn't been working for a foreign pretender. He had been raising one from childhood. Adrian wasn't an opportunist. He was the culmination of a 50-year plan to reclaim the throne. Lord Pemberton, Charlotte said, who murdered my father and attempted to murder me. You'll forgive me if I question the reliability of his support. Adrian's expression hardened slightly.
Lord Pemberton was forced to take extreme measures because your family refused to acknowledge the truth of their illegitimate rule. But we're not here to debate his methods. We're here to determine the rightful succession. He gestured to Master Benedict, who produced another set of documents. These records detailed the circumstances of your birth, Adrian continued. They show quite conclusively that you are not King Edmund's biological daughter, but rather the child of an illegitimate union between Queen Isabella's sister and an unknown scholar. The throne room erupted in gasps and whispered conversations. Marcus could see shock and confusion on the faces of the nobles who had supported Charlotte. Furthermore, Adrian pressed his advantage. Even if we were to accept that King Edmund acknowledged you as his daughter, that acknowledgement was based on a lie. Under Valdorian law, a succession based on deliberate deception is null and void. Charlotte stood perfectly still during Adrian's accusations, her composure remarkable under the circumstances. When he finished, she spoke with clear, unwavering authority. Lord Adrian, she said, deliberately using his title rather than your majesty, you speak of truth and legitimacy. Very well. Let us have the complete truth, rather than selective revelations designed to serve your ambition. She turned to address the entire court, her voice rising to carry to every corner of the vast room. It is true that I am not King Edmund's biological daughter, she said, causing another wave of murmurs through the crowd. My mother was Lady Catherine Ashford, Queen Isabella's sister, who fell in love with a scholar of noble birth. When she became pregnant, both she and the Queen made a decision that prioritized the stability of the kingdom over personal desires. Marcus watched the faces in the crowd as Charlotte spoke. Instead of shock or disgust, he saw growing understanding and even sympathy. Queen Isabella, who had been unable to bear children of her own, agreed to present my mother's child as her own to ensure the succession. My mother died in childbirth, sacrificing her life so that I could live as a princess rather than a bastard. Queen Isabella died 3 days later, having fulfilled her duty to the crown at the cost of her own happiness. Charlotte's voice grew stronger as she continued. This was not deception born of ambition or greed. This was sacrifice born of love. Love for each other, love for the kingdom, and love for the people of Valdoria. I have spent 25 years trying to prove worthy of that sacrifice. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. But since Lord Adrian values bloodlines above character, Charlotte continued, let me present someone whose claim is even stronger than mine by the standards he has set. She gestured toward Marcus, who stepped forward as they had planned. Captain Marcus Blackwood has served this kingdom faithfully for 20 years, Charlotte announced. What you may not know is that he is my half-brother, born of the same scholar father 3 days before me. By the laws of primogeniture that Lord Adrian holds so dear, Marcus is the true heir to King Edmund's acknowledged line. The revelation sent shockwaves through the throne room. Marcus saw nobles frantically whispering to each other, trying to process the implications. Adrian's face had gone pale, clearly not having expected this development. However, Charlotte raised her voice above the growing murmur. Captain Blackwood has declined to press his claim. He believes, as I do, that the ability to rule matters more than the accident of birth. He has chosen to support my claim not because of family loyalty, but because he believes I am the person best prepared to lead Valdoria into the future. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of his military command. My lords and ladies, I have served 3 generations of the royal family. I have seen Princess Charlotte grow from a child into a woman of wisdom, compassion, and strength. I have watched her make difficult decisions that put the kingdom's welfare above her own desires. Blood may determine inheritance, but character determines worthiness. Adrian was clearly scrambling to regain control of the situation. This is all very touching, he said, but it doesn't change the fundamental facts. My claim predates any of Edmund's line, legitimate or bastard. The throne was stolen from my family, and I am here to reclaim it. With an army of foreign mercenaries, Marcus observed loudly. Tell us, Lord Adrian, how do Mercian soldiers serve Valdoria's interests? They serve the interests of justice. They serve the interests of whoever pays them, Sir Thomas Aldrich interrupted from his position among Charlotte's supporters. I fought against Mercian companies. They're skilled soldiers, but brutal occupiers. Adrian's composure was beginning to crack. The transition of power requires security measures. What it requires, Charlotte said firmly, is legitimacy. And legitimacy comes not from documents or armies, but from the consent of the governed. She turned once again to address the full court. People of Valdoria, she said, you have heard the competing claims. You have seen the evidence. You know the characters of those who seek to rule you. I submit this question to you. Who do you trust to lead this kingdom? A man who has lived in exile, supported by foreign soldiers and the murderer of